Hello, Intertubers, and welcome to another interlude in the Frontier series. This time, ship reviews. I'm going to review all the ships that you can fly and say what I think of them. The scale is fairly simple, 1 star up to 5 stars, except that some of the ships in this game are so bad that even giving them 0 stars would be far too generous. So the scale must be extended down into the negative numbers, where we have ships that are slightly crap, which I'll just give 1 crap to, all the way down to 5 craps, which is reserved for ships that are absolutely useless and just unusable for any purpose. One other thing is a convenient infographic, the ship info bar. This will tell you a few things like what the ship is, how far you can go with a particular drive, and this bottom row here is a breakdown of the hull, as a breakdown of, well, what the total ship mass is used for. Grey is used for hull, blue is the hyperspace drive, in this case standard class 2, red is the fuel for that drive, and then the white space, labelled with a tonnage, is how much space is left over. Of course, that will have to be split between equipment like shields and lasers and trading space. In the case of some ships, like especially the Cobra Mark III, there's more than one way to build it. Like, you could fit a class 3 standard drive. I don't really like doing that because it really eats into the space. Best way of doing it, of course, is the class 3 military drive. It's an expensive option, but a really good one. Gives you a ridiculous 18 light year range and 47 tons of fuel, and maybe even a little bit more, 47 tons of space, and maybe even a little bit more if you're not making a full length jump. Oh, and this statistic here, this 80%, is hull efficiency. It's essentially telling you how much of the ship's total mass is not hull. 80% is, I guess, pretty standard. Anything better than this is really good. Anything worse than this is a little bit annoying because it's just wasting space. So I will call out any significant deviations from that. Anyway, without further nonsense, let's get this show going. We're going from smallest to largest, so the first ship is the Interplanetary Shuttle. It's the smallest ship in the game, weighing in at a total mass of 8 tons. Hull efficiency, 50%, is very bad. That leaves it with 4 tons left, and all of that is taken up by the drive. Now, it has cute little landing skis, but doesn't have the decency to have an undercarriage animation that lifts them up or anything. Now, because it has 0 free space, you obviously can't fit it with anything to trade or even any equipment to fight with. And worst of all, it can't even refuel, because the way you refuel in this game is by putting a ton of fuel in the cargo bay and then transferring that to the engine, which you can't do here. So you eventually run out of fuel and drift in space forever. The shuttle can show up for purchase anywhere, including starports in an atmosphere. And that's an interesting proposition, considering that you can't fit atmospheric shielding to it. Let's see what happens when we launch. So, yeah, I give this ship 5 craps without hesitation. Avoid it. The second smallest ship is the Lifter. This ship has the dubious distinction of being the slowest ship in the game, with absolutely appalling thruster speed of 4 Gs forward and 2 Gs backwards. But it does have a slightly larger hull than the Interplanetary Shuttle, and a more efficient hull as well, which gives it exactly 7 tons of space, which would seem to be enough for a Class 1 hyperdrive and 1 ton of fuel. There's just one small problem. If you try to remove the built-in interplanetary drive, you can't, because it's built into the ship. So, if you can't travel through hyperspace, what use is this ship? Well, there's really only one thing you can do, and that is to buy something with a negative price, like a radioactives, and then dump it. So here, radioactives are illegal, which means you can buy them for minus 8 credits, which means I'm getting paid 25 credits just to take these radioactives away. This does have one slight advantage over the Interplanetary Shuttle in that it has a real undercarriage animation. So just look at that, that's so good. Anyway, what you should do, of course, is get away from the space station as fast as your amazing 4Gs of thrust will take you, and then dump the radioactives, which I actually can't do yet because I'm still in the rotating frame of the space station. So just turn the ship around to break that. Now, you might think I've dumped the radioactives too close because I've just sucked up 9,000 credits in fines. But this is actually the correct way to do it with the lifter. And the reason for that is pretty simple. The space station will launch the police. Sadly, the first wave of police crashed into the edge of the docking tunnel and died, but maybe the second wave will come out. Oh yeah, there we go. It did actually get a few police out. And see, if you do it this way, the police will shoot you, and then you will die, and then you're not flying a lifter anymore. Yeah, I'm going to give this one 4 craps. It's technically better than an interplanetary shuttle, but not by much. Next up we have the Osprey. This is the smallest real ship, which is to say the smallest ship that has a proper hyperspace drive fitted as standard. It's very small and very fast, 27 Gs forward and 8 Gs backward, and that's really good. Also has a respectable hyperspace range because it is so small. The only problem here is that small ships don't have a lot of cargo space. If you fit what I would consider to be the bare minimum, a laser, an autopilot and a radar mapper, you're left with 2 tons left, one of which has to be fuel. You can use the other one for trading, so you can do some trading in unsafe systems. So yeah, it's a small little ship, so small you see this little dude in the cockpit. That's me. Very traditional wheelie undercarriage, and huge wings which don't really do anything in space other than make it an easier target. But don't be fooled, this is still really hard to shoot down. So enjoy the flight highlights. One thing should be clear here. Because there's only room for the basic 1 megawatt laser, it's taken me more than 1 shot to kill things. That's actually a really big problem, because the AI will often launch missiles with damage, and since I'm not one-shotting these tiny ships, I'm going to eat a lot of missiles. Still, this ship has 27 Gs of forward thrust, so it can usually evade the missiles. It's not exactly bad, just very small. 1 star. Now, the Federation has their own microfighter. This is the Falcon. It's mechanically almost identical to the Osprey. It is 1 ton heavier than 16 tons, and unfortunately that extra ton does go into the hull. But what you get for that is the fastest ship in the game. Main thruster of 30 is absolutely crazy. Retro of 9 is pretty damn good. So that kind of justifies the hull being slightly less efficient than the Osprey. Now, the Falcon is available from Federation planets. In principle, this was actually the hardest ship in the entire game for me to find. I eventually managed to find one in all the way down here in this weird little cluster of Federation planets That exists right down in sector 2-12. That would be, you know, beyond the Empire, and let's see, about 100 light years away from Sol. So, yeah, I really had to search to find this one. Still, it's a fairly nice looking ship. Really undercarriage. It has smaller wings than the Osprey, and that, combined with it being the fastest ship in the game, makes it really, really difficult to shoot down. It's one of the most annoying opponents to face in combat. Probably even more annoying than the Osprey. Still, has all the same problems as the Osprey, the big one being a lack of space. So I do think this is a slightly better Osprey, but it's still a 1-star ship. Now we come to the Hawk Airfighter. This is another microfighter, slightly larger than the Falcon, and probably the ship that looks most like a conventional fighter plane. I think lore-wise it probably is a conventional fighter plane that's just somehow found its way onto the civilian spaceship market. However, it has a very big problem. That problem is it doesn't really have any cargo space at all. You get 7 tons of space, which is just enough room for a military drive and a ton of fuel. But then this ship calls itself an airfighter, which would suggest you have to fit atmospheric shielding and a pulse laser, but you can't fit both. It also has the nerve to have 2 missile mountings, even though realistically you're only going to have 1. So that is the problem right there, an absolutely absurd hull which takes about 2/3 of the space, leaving you with not a lot. I mean, undercarriage is fine, and I guess this is a very small ship, very hard to shoot down, but since you can't carry any weapons, they'll get you eventually. Anyway, if you don't bother to buy hyperspace fuel, then you can buy the missile. So you might wonder, what's so good about that? Well, the use for the missile is pretty obvious, really. Yeah, this ship is absolute garbage. 4 craps. Next we have the Kestrel. This is the better airfighter, although honestly that isn't saying much. The performance is similar to the other airfighter, which I will note is worse than both the Osprey and the Falcon. This time you have a grand total of 9 tons of fuel, which after we account for the drive and the fuel to power that drive, adds up to a grand total of 2 spaces for upgrades. Still, if you use these for atmospheric shielding and a pulse laser, then technically we have an airfighter. There we go, look at the airfighter. Still, what else can you do with this ship? The answer to that question has to be not a lot. You can fit it with an autopilot. You have 1 ton of cargo space to spare for trading in the safest of safe systems. Maybe you could be a courier. Did those two please just crash into each other? That's probably going to do me in. Yeah, maybe you could be a courier. You know, fit autopilot with 1 pulse laser and carry parcels around. That's about the only use I can think of for this ship. Yeah, it's trash. I mean, slightly better than the other fighter, but still, 3 craps. Now, this ship is a classic. It's the original long-range fighter. In-universe military drives are a relatively new invention, so before that, long-range fighter meant something that could fit a standard class 1, which this easily can with its 20 tons of space. Thrusters on this are very good. 25 forward and 10 backward. Pretty damn good. Only like really small fighters are going to beat this. Let's get a look at this thing. Undercarriage, yeah, whatever. It has one. I think this also is the first ship that has both a proper forward thrust animation and rear thrust as well, so that's nice. Hull efficiency is 80%, this is the best so far, and not much is going to beat that. 9 tons of space, definitely enough to fight, trade, or do a little bit of both. But the military drive option is better, that will free up 4 tons of space and is definitely recommended. A solid little ship, but it is still little. 2 stars. Next up we have the Federation's improved version of the Eagle Mark II. You get 2 extra tons of trading room, that's nice, but you really pay for it. They also improved the main thruster, that's nice of them. It now accelerates you at an incredible 28G. And this seemingly was achieved by ripping out half of the retro thrusters. 4G backwards is terrible, and if you use the retro thrusters in combat, you will notice that. It's bad. And it also substantially adds to autopilot journey times. I mean, otherwise this is much like the Eagle. And very deceptively, these actually look like pretty powerful reverse thrusters. They're not. They stink. Maybe it's because they're like these spindly little lines. I mean, it's still basically eagle shaped. You've got your pilot, you've got your registration number, which is weirdly clipping past the line of the ship. I never noticed that before. Yeah, that's a bit weird. Oh well, at least you're inside looking out, so you don't have to care about that. Still, you have a slightly less efficient hull. Now, if you want to trade, I think the 2 points of cargo are definitely worth it, either in the standard configuration or the military drive one. If you want to take this into combat, don't. This is best suited for boring jobs. I'll still give it 2 stars. Now, the final Eagle is the Empire's version, the Eagle Mark III. This one, the Empire has definitely fixed the retro thruster problem. 15G for rear acceleration is outstanding. I think that might be the best in the game, and you still have the same cargo space that you did before, so that's great. Unfortunately, the problem is that this ship is now a bit on the heavy side. Hyperspace range with the Class 1 drive is 6.6 light years, and that's painful. There's so many standard trade routes that you just can't do with such a small ship. Anyway, if we turn it around, undercarriage normal. It does at least have the decency to have a very nice looking rear thruster. See, look at that, it's huge. Which reflects it. Oh, why don't you just piss off, Peter Space? Are you serious? Yeah, well, maybe that demonstrates just how powerful the rear thrusters are. They knocked me back into range of the space station. So anyway, it solves the rear thruster problem of the Mark II, and you have the same amount of cargo space. But this was achieved by making the hull heavier, so yeah, very painful hyperspace range of 6.66 light years. Now, there is a possible fix here, which is to cram a Class 2 military drive into this ship. I mean, that works. It looks like you'd have 6 tons left, but you could call it a 13 light year range, which is more than enough for anyone, I think, and you then have 8 tons left, which isn't so bad. But still, this has less trading space than, say, an Eagle 1 with a Class 1 military drive. So, this is either a fairly boring trader or an exciting ship that completely owns the phrase long-range fighter at the cost of not having a lot of cargo space. I think I'd give the trading version 1 stars and the really expensive Class 2 military version 2.5.